let's go ahead and get started. We have the climate action plan that Cupertino has put together. This is its second one, I believe. And we were talking about this before, about how it's such a fundamental challenge to communicate urgency through a government report. Those are like two opposite ends of the emotional continuum. At the same time, it's a fundamentally important effort, not just for local businesses and chamber members, but the entire community and arguably the entire planet. It reminds me of one of these little jokes where it's so true, it's cliche that survival of the species is everyone's business. It's not really profound, but it's also true. So with no further ado, Jilly, I think you're going to be leading the show.
Yeah, let me get my screen share coming.
All right, it's all you. And if you could introduce yourself and also Karen.
Yes, great. Just one second. Let me go back to the beginning here. Great. Well, thank you, Rick, for giving us this opportunity to pop onto your agenda. I'm Gilly Corral. I'm the Climate and Utilities Analyst with the City of Cupertino. And in addition to John, who's here, we're joined with city staff, Duurvoort, who's our Sustainability Manager. He'll be here for questions today. And co-presenting is, I think you've met Karen Chen. She's our AmeriCorps Fellow. So this hopefully short presentation is part of our roadshow to the launch of our draft Climate Action Plan 2.0, as Rick had mentioned. This draft plan is actually a culmination of about 1.5 years of planning and engagement with leaders such as yourselves and through the general public through surveys and workshops and public meetings. Now our cap is over 100 pages, but not to get you all worried, we're not going to go through all of it. We just pulled out the most exciting parts to share with you today. And our goals are just to go over the CAP 2.0 and the process, and also answer any questions that you have and any feedback that you want to give, especially on actions that might or will impact Cupertino businesses. And then lastly, just to review the next steps of the adoption process, so you can be sure to know when and how to make your voice heard and connect with us on this process. So I'm going to give an overview of the CAP, and throughout this presentation, if you have questions, you can drop them in the chat and my colleagues can answer live, or we can, can raise your hand and stop us during the presentation or afterwards if you would like to do that. So this is the direct link to the draft Climate Action Plan. And Karen, if you could just drop this link in the chat. I don't expect you to pull it up right now, just wanted to make sure you have it so you can go directly to the document I'm reviewing today. So why are we updating the Climate Action Plan? The first CAP was developed in 2015. And at that time, our goal was to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions or pollution by 15% by 2020. That's compared with our 2010 levels. And we've actually met that goal ahead of schedule, which is great. I know we're updating and refreshing the plan with new technology and measures just to keep going on that momentum and accelerate the reduction of emissions through the next couple of decades. And I just wanted to show this pie chart because it shows just a snapshot of the current emissions in our community by sector. And you can kind of see here the biggest sectors of emissions are transportation from diesel and gasoline cars and trucks. And the second largest is building energy, primarily natural gas. And you'll see a lot of the measures and actions in the draft CAP will get at those two sections, transportation and building energy. So this is a waterfall chart that just gives you a sense of the relative impact of the different sections of our draft CAP at reducing the emissions. So the emissions we're showing on the blue bars, and the red bars are showing the reductions to get down to our goal, which is a carbon neutral city by 2040. State law will actually reduce emissions. That's that first chunk, but then the rest is kind of up to us. And we have a few of those red bars. The larger one is, the first large one is cleaning the air and then connecting communities. Those are going to be the sources of most reductions. And although the getting to zero waste and working with nature are smaller bars, they are still critical parts of the CAP because they'll be working on protecting Cupertino's natural environment. And there are dozens of measures and actions in the CAP. If you go through it, you'll see there's lots of them there, but for the sake of time, we're just going to highlight the ones in each of these main sections that we expect to be most relevant to you. First section is cleaning the air. Today, we are lucky we can use clean green electricity to completely power our homes and businesses in Cupertino. And this section just highlights measures that will help our community to accelerate that switch to all electric and efficient buildings. First up is a measure that's promoting the use of green energy and also efficiency through energy benchmarking to establish a program for large commercial businesses and develop educational program to promote benefits of opting into Silicon Valley clean energy services for carbon-free electricity use. This next measure, the city is going to partner with the business community to conduct an energy master plan and develop a commercial building electrification strategy. And the result of this planning process is going to be an ordinance for existing buildings. So for example, the ordinance may require that natural gas appliances be replaced with electric at the time of a major renovation. However, throughout the development of this ordinance, we'll come back to the chamber and other business associations to get your feedback and input as we develop the ordinance. And we have a similar measure for the residential sector as well. This one is to require new development to be all electric. We're actually already doing this through our code. However, we wanted to make sure it was in the CAP to keep it going throughout the various code cycles. And we also want to support the procurement of carbon fuels and commercial projects that use fuel cells or stationary generators or other equipment that right now can't be electric. We just want to coordinate with the city to make sure we can procure carbon-free fuels for the operation of that equipment. And also work with our natural gas provider. The city uses ABAG Power to just start working on that market to develop alternatives to natural gas, such as renewable diesel fuels. So I'm going to hand it off to Karen, who's going to run through the transportation section.
Thanks, Gilly. So this section is the Connecting Communities section, which looks at transportation and land use. The first measure is about the active transportation plan, which looks at opportunities to have people walk, bike, and move through active transportation through Cupertino. And the two actions to highlight here are, the first is to identify ways that we can connect neighborhoods with commercial areas. And the second action highlighted is to evaluate and update policies to make sure that bike parking is installed for new commercial development and retrofits. The second measure focuses on expanding shared transit programs. The first highlighted action is to expand the Via Shuttle program. The second highlighted action is to require employers with 25 or more employees to develop a transportation demand management plan. And that might include subsidies for helping employees to bike, walk, or carpool, or providing free transit passes. And the third highlighted action is to support regional transportation coordination. Next slide, please, Gilly. So this third measure is increasing zero emission vehicle adoption. The first highlighted action is to create an ordinance to install electric vehicle charging at existing multifamily and commercial sites. The second is to develop and implement a plan for the city to support businesses in shifting their vehicle fleets from gas and diesel powered vehicles to zero emission vehicles. And the last highlighted action is to support bringing a ZEV car share company or companies to Cupertino. Next slide, please. Oh. And this fourth measure is refocusing transportation to some of the goals that I had highlighted earlier for transportation. The first is to conduct public outreach and analysis to see the community impacts and benefits of having a disincentive-based policy. And that might look like having parking limits or charging fees for using rideshare companies. And the second highlighted action is looking at how we can fund the active and public transit programs. And that might look like a local tax for an income tax, a gas tax, or potentially a car registration tax. And this last measure is about off-road equipment. That includes lawnmowers, construction equipment, leaf blowers, which Rhoda, I believe you had a question about. The first two actions highlighted are about expanding rebates and incentives to help support the switch over to zero emission equipment. And the last action is an ordinance that would ban using gas and diesel powered off-road equipment. And Gilly, I will hand it back over to you for the waste section.
Great, got a little trigger happy, sorry about that. I also saw a question about heating and cooling in city-owned properties and wateries. Great observation, this climate action plan is really, the measures are focused on the community level, on the city, whatever codes and any ordinances that we have, city buildings are subject to those as well. However, we're going to have a more focused plan just for municipal buildings through a separate effort once we adopt this cap. Great, next section is getting to zero waste. This first measure gets at something you may be familiar with, SB 1383. It's been in the news over the past few months, and this state law is now putting more teeth in the requirements for businesses and residents to sort out organic waste. So when I say organic waste, like food scraps and paper that's sold with food that can be composted, so they can be dealt with properly. And our goal is to partner with you to help meet the state's requirements and provide support along the way, and to reduce contamination to our landfill. And the next step would then be enforcement through fees for incorrectly sorted materials. Also, through the waste section, we're going to reduce landfill by increasing recycling and working with the business community to design programs such as extender producer responsibility and take back programs, and also increase bans on items that you can't recycle. We've already started this actually through the single-use plastics ordinance, which was a city council work program item, and there's a draft before the city council now for consideration. We're also going to work on requiring large events to use an event waste management service so we can reduce waste in the community at the source. And back to you, Karen, for the working with nature section.
This section is about storing carbon, promoting biodiversity, and conserving water. And because these measures are relevant, but not as directly relevant as the others, I've condensed them into this summary slide here. And the first measure is an urban forest management plan, which explores opportunities to add and protect trees in Cupertino. The second measure is about looking at ways that we can add and expand open space to store carbon. And the action I wanted to highlight here is one that encourages or requires carbon to be sequestered in building materials. The third measure is reducing per capita water consumption through education policies and resources. And the relevant action is adopting an ordinance that might require installing gray water systems at new residential construction and major retrofits. And the last measure is just to support greenhouse gas emissions reduction at the regional wastewater facility. And while the first four sections we went over looked at ways that we can reduce our carbon pollution, this one, the Adaptation Resilience section, looks at ways that we can protect Cupertino even as the climate is changing. The three measures in this section are to increase the usage of natural infrastructure solutions, rain gardens, bioswales, items like that, that not only can help decrease flooding risks, but also have other benefits like cooling the air and decreasing air quality concerns, which are some of the actions we have identified as ways the climate will change. And one of the actions is a demonstration, which I think talks a little bit more to Rhoda's point about having more earth-friendly measures on our property. The second measure is bolstering emergency preparedness and response. So making sure the city understands how the changing climate will affect Cupertino and that emergency preparedness is able to respond and protect Cupertino. That last measure is education, resources, and policies, so that not only is the city prepared, but residents and the Cupertino community understand what these risks are and can also take action on their own to make sure that everyone is fully prepared and protected from climate change. So this is the last section, and I will hand it back to Gilly for next steps.
Great, thanks, Karen. I wanted to give you I wanted to put up the portal for engagement on the screen. This is cupertino.org/climate action. We've used this website throughout the planning of the climate action plan to organize information that we're putting out there, as well as we could actually receive feedback through the site. So you can go to this site and you can stay informed by subscribing to project updates there. And there's a short 5-minute video, which is a great thing to share out to your networks if you just want a high-level short video of the CAP and project itself. We also have important documents such as the draft CAP since it's been released, and dates that are coming up, such as commission meetings and city council sessions that discuss this CAP. So next steps, we're really excited to get to the point where we're starting to start that adoption process. And the next meeting that we're having is with City Council at a study session just on this topic. We hope to have that study session on June 21st. And you can email, as a business representative or the chamber, you can email City Council with your written comments on this CAP ahead of the meeting, or you can, of course, turn up to the public meeting and speak as well. So we're encouraging folks to do that. And also, we're posting these, if the date changes, we're posting these on our cupertino.org/climate action website. We hope to move this through to the adoption phase in early August. So that concludes my presentation. Just an extra call out for us to contact us at sustainability@cupertino.org. If you have any questions or you have another idea where we can take this roadshow next. And I just really appreciate the time that you spent. I do see a couple of questions in the chat. Yep, I hear that. Early adopter for municipal facilities. We are working in the background on some of these measures already, trying to plan for electric vehicle infrastructure and other resiliency measures for our own city properties. So thank you for that comment. And yeah, if there are other questions, Rick, we can take those. We can take those now, and I'll just stop sharing here.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Karen and Julie. There's a lot of work, and I know there's going to be a lot of questions. If people have them, raise your hand or add them to the chat. I think there's going to be one of the couple of questions that I had. One is if the slides are available and we can share them.
Yeah, I'd be happy to pass that on to you.
The other was many communities around here are using the shared scooters. I was reminded of this when I saw the zero emission EV program. Is that on the radar for Cupertino at all?
Yeah, and I think Karen put in the chat that yes, I think you're right on. One of those many dozen measures.
Okay.
You just predicted it. We've got one covering that as well. The scooters, considering, most of the measures around considering and planning, since we're not quite to the point of adopting, these sorts of programs, but potential e-scooter or e-bike share program, reconsidering that as part of the active transportation section.
Yeah, Cupertino has a great landscape for that sort of transportation, and so that last mile is of course the longest mile, right? Other questions for our team. One of the questions we always get is about enforcement. And some of the early measures, and I'm sorry I lost track of this slide about some of the changes to the building infrastructure. That's easy to implement when projects come into City Hall for evaluation and approval. For some of the other retrofitting, what's the expectation regarding enforcement?
It depends on what type of ordinance we end up with. Part of the a main part of the measure is developing that ordinance and how we would enforce it. This is new ground that we're treading in the community in the Bay Area, and we're not the only city working on this with existing buildings. What I anticipate happening is that some of our community members and regional partners will help to develop model ordinance around this, and Cupertino will take this type of model ordinance through these planning processes and seeing where best to fit those enforcement mechanisms. But we gave the example of possibly, replacing on retrofit because it will, a lot of the pulling of the permits, those sort of stop points to catch someone to electrify that appliance. So the short answer is we don't have those details worked out, but we're definitely considering the permit process as one of those opportunities to electrify appliances.
Are there other communities that Cupertino's and Cupertino staff are looking towards where they feel that good things are happening, that there's a successful model that is maybe not completely informing, but guiding the local process?
Yeah, we have a lot of cities that are, pushing forward already with plans to draft what they call burnout ordinances. I don't know if Andre, you're available to speak to that. He's more in those circles.
Yeah, thanks, Gilly, and great presentation. Good question, Rick. So yeah, the regional collaboration has been a big focus for us because there's a lot of activity really centered around Northern California cities in this space. We also are members of a group called the Urban Sustainability Directors Network. That's a nationwide group of people talking about these types of ordinances and plans. So I guess if I had to raise up some particular cities in our area that are on a similar track to Cupertino, I'd say Mountain View is another good example. They updated their climate action plan a couple of years ago with very similar plans, and they're underway with sort of the detailed implementation of those plans. Berkeley, Palo Alto, those are of course usually in the leading pack, which is nice for us because we kind of watch what a city like Berkeley or Palo Alto will do, and we'll try to see if it works before bringing it to Cupertino. So in a way, we're kind of second, which is a nice place from my point of view to see issues getting worked out and then bring it to Cupertino in a way that's really going to be successful. So we're definitely working arm in arm, and then groups like Silicon Valley Clean Energy act as sort of regional collaborators as well. So they'll be developing model ordinances. Valley Water is another one, developing model ordinances around water efficiency.
Great. Yeah, that's to be among the leaders. That's
it's a much more comfortable
slightly
place.
better. Yes. Yes. For us, and certainly our members in the business community generally, and it's the larger organizations, of course, are very interested in consistency across jurisdiction, but it's surprisingly low down, very small mom and pop restaurants. They have three different restaurants in 3 different neighboring communities here in Silicon Valley. So there's a real interest in not operating each restaurant according to different regs. Again, the smaller the organization, the narrower the bandwidth. Certainly when you get to the solopreneurs, they really have no bandwidth at all to deal with anything other than the most urgent matters. Great, other questions? I'm glad you all could be here because I expect we're going to be talking more about it. I was looking around to do some reading to catch up on what's going on and stumbled across The Ministry of the Future, a cli-fi novel that's evidently very factually evident. So if you want to have trouble sleeping at night, I definitely recommend this book. It's climate's a I guess, the proverbial big issue that we get to wrestle with in our time. So thank you to Karen, Jilly, and Andre for leading this charge locally, and hopefully we'll be able to get to speak more to and about this issue as it moves forward. Zero emission in 2040.
2040, yeah.
2040, and with a nice circular economy, wouldn't that be kind of amazing? That'd be great. Well, we want to help. Thank you for coming, and we want to make sure what we adopt is something that works.
Well, thank you so
everyone.
much.
Great. Thank you.